It was supposed to be a quiet night shift, but then I got a call from some friends I hadn't seen in months. "Hey, come over, let's have a drink," they said. I could hear something in their voices, something that sounded almost scared. I left the station and found myself at the bar sooner than I expected. Only Mike was there, sitting alone at a corner table. He looked different. I had never seen him like this before. There was a kind of haunted look in his eyes, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. "What's going on, Mike?" I asked as I slid into the chair across from him. He looked around nervously, his eyes darting to the door and back. "It's work," he whispered. I don't even know where to start." Mike worked for the city, in the tech department. His job was to oversee the city's surveillance network, thousands of cameras spread throughout the downtown core, the surrounding neighborhoods, and even out into the suburbs. Most of the footage was routine: traffic, pedestrians, nothing of note. But some videos got flagged, tagged, and filed into a special archive. "They called it Tartarus," he explained. "Named after the deepest prison in Greek mythology, where even the gods sent their enemies to suffer forever. Fitting really, because whatever's in that archive, it's not right." He told me he'd been breaking protocol, bringing some of the flagged footage home and compiling it. "I couldn't let it go," he muttered. "There were patterns. Things I couldn't ignore." I hesitated, my gut telling me this was a bad idea, but curiosity got the better of me. "Show me," I said. Mike led me down to his basement. The walls were lined with monitors, computers, and hard drives stacked up like a digital graveyard. He plugged in an external drive and hit play. The first video flickered to life. It was downtown, 3 a.m. The streets were empty, the city asleep. The camera showed a quiet intersection, no cars, no people. Then suddenly, a woman emerged from a side street, glancing over her shoulder in a panic. She was running, her breath visible in the cold night air. The camera tracked her, switching between angles. But there was no one behind her. She stumbled into the middle of the intersection, her face contorted in terror as if something was right behind her, something invisible. And then her body lifted off the ground, like a puppet on a string, her feet dangling several feet in the air. Her head jerked violently to the side, and she collapsed to the pavement. The screen went black. I just stared, speechless. Mike looked at me with a grim expression. "You haven't seen the worst of it," he said, and queued up the next video. Mike clicked on another file, labeled Black Crab. This one was longer, and he seemed even more uneasy about it. As the video began, I immediately saw the shaky footage of an empty subway platform at night. The camera was pointed down the length of the platform, showing a few benches, some trash cans, and the dark tunnel stretching out into the blackness. "The Walkley station," Mike muttered. "It's the last stop on the line, surrounded by new housing on one side and forest on the other." This was recorded just after the station closed for the night. The lights on the platform suddenly flickered off, plunging the area into darkness. The camera switched to night vision, the platform glowing green in the infrared. I watched the empty space for what felt like minutes, straining my eyes to catch any movement. Then, from the tunnel, something started to crawl out. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. It moved strangely, jerking and twisting its limbs in a way that no human should. But as it got closer, I could see it more clearly. A man, but he was crawling on his hands and feet, upside down, with his back arched and his stomach facing the ceiling. His hair dragged along the ground, long and tangled, and he wore ragged layers of clothing, caked with filth. He moved quickly, more like an insect than a man, scuttling up the platform towards the staircase. The footage cut to a new camera in the hallway leading out of the station. We watched as he climbed up the stairs, 2 at a time, crawling over the turnstiles with ease. "He looks broken," I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the screen. Mike nodded. "Yeah. That's what they say happened. Decades ago, he was a lawyer. Had a family. Then there was a fire. He lost everything." His mind snapped. He threw himself in front of a subway train, right there at Walkley Station. But he didn't die. At least, not completely. The footage cut to an exterior camera. We watched as the crab-walking man squeezed his body through a narrow gate, his bones seeming to bend in unnatural ways. He paused outside, sniffing the air like an animal, before scuttling off towards the woods. Then the footage jumped forward. An hour later, the man re-emerged from the forest, dragging something in his teeth, a small animal, maybe a cat. He crawled back through the gate and disappeared into the tunnel. Mike fast-forwarded through dozens of similar scenes, showing the man crawling out of the subway, heading into the forest, and returning with small, dead creatures. And then, near the end of the footage, it showed him reappearing in a downtown alleyway, crawling over a pile of garbage bags and cardboard boxes. There was a violent flurry of movement in the pile, thrashing limbs and desperate struggles.
And then, it went still.
I realized with a sickening dread what I was looking at. The crab walker was eating someone, Mike said quietly.
A homeless man.
They found the body a few days later, mutilated. The investigation led nowhere. They didn't even have a suspect. The video cut off, and I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't look away from the screen, even as the images burned into my mind. Mike took a deep breath and said, "But that's not the worst of it." He switched to another video. This one was labeled Cloud Mirror. I had a bad feeling about it, but before I could say anything, Mike pressed play. The monitors lit up with footage from 5 different intersections downtown, all recorded at the same time. The streets were silent and deserted. The streetlights flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Then, all at once, a small glowing orb appeared in the center of each intersection, pulsing with a strange hypnotic light. The orb started to expand, growing from the size of a basketball to the size of a car. They began to drift down the streets, twisting and turning like they were looking for something. The cameras cut from angle to angle, following the orb's strange, erratic movements. "What the hell are those?" I asked, leaning in closer to the screen.
Mike shook his head. "I don't know."
At first, I thought they were some kind of gas leak or electrical malfunction, but then they started to change. The next video showed one of the orbs as it drifted down a deserted street. A group of people appeared at the far end, seemingly drawn by the light. They approached slowly, their faces blank, as if they were in a trance. One by one, they stepped into the glowing mass and disappeared.
For a moment, there was nothing.
Then they reappeared, stepping out of the orb, one by one. But something was wrong. Their movements were too stiff, too synchronized. The way they looked at each other, without speaking, sent a chill down my spine. "That was my boss and his wife," Mike whispered. "They were never the same after that night." I felt my stomach drop as I realized what he was saying. People were going into the light, and coming out different. Mike paused the video and turned to me. "Now do you see why I had to show you this? Why I had to get it out? I don't know what's happening, but I'm afraid, and I think they're watching me now." I could hear the fear in his voice, a desperation I'd never heard from him before. He grabbed another hard drive and plugged it in. "There's one more," he said. "But I'm not sure if you're ready to see it."
I wasn't sure either, but I nodded anyway.
Mike's hands were shaking as he inserted the next hard drive. The file name simply read, "The Mirror." He hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the play button, as if he was trying to decide whether or not to actually show me this last video. But then he pressed play, and the screen lit up again. This footage was different. It wasn't from the city cameras, it was from inside an old abandoned building. A warehouse maybe, judging by the exposed brick walls and rusted metal beams. The camera was positioned high up, looking down at a large, empty space. A single, flickering fluorescent light hung from the ceiling, casting erratic shadows across the room. In the center of the room was a large antique mirror, the kind you might find in an old mansion, with a heavy, ornate frame. It seemed out of place, like it had been dragged there from somewhere else. The mirror was cracked and dusty, reflecting a distorted image of the room around it. Mike leaned closer to the screen, his face tight with concentration. "This is where things get weird," he muttered. The video showed nothing for several minutes. Just the empty room and that eerie, cracked mirror. I was about to ask what I was supposed to be seeing when a figure stepped into frame. A man disheveled and gaunt, like he hadn't slept in days. He approached the mirror slowly, almost cautiously, like he was afraid of what he might see. As he got closer, I realized I recognized him. It was Mike's boss, the same man who had stepped out of the glowing orb, the one who had seemed different. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a kind of blank terror. He stopped in front of the mirror and stared into it, unblinking. I could see his lips moving, but no sound came through the speakers. His hands twitched at his sides, like he was having some kind of internal struggle. Then, suddenly, his expression changed. His eyes went wide with horror, and he stepped back, shaking his head violently as if trying to deny whatever he was seeing. But the reflection in the mirror, it didn't move. I felt a chill run down my spine. The man in the mirror was still staring straight ahead, his eyes locked onto his counterpart. But the expression on his face was different, a wicked, knowing grin spreading slowly across his features. "What the hell?" I whispered, leaning closer to the screen. Mike swallowed hard. "Just keep watching," he muttered, his voice barely more than a whisper. The man outside the mirror seemed to realize what was happening. He backed away, his mouth moving faster now, shouting something silent at the unresponsive reflection. And then, in one swift motion, the figure inside the mirror stepped forward, as if walking through a doorway. The man outside the mirror froze. He looked down at his hands, turning them over, his face twisting in confusion and horror. The figure in the mirror began to laugh, a soft, eerie sound that gradually grew louder until it filled the entire room. The camera's microphone finally caught it, a low, distorted cackle that sent shivers down my spine. The figure in the mirror stepped forward again, but this time, there was no glass. He moved through it, like stepping through water, and stood directly in front of the man. The grin widened, impossibly wide, stretching across his face. And then, it reached out. The screen flickered, and for a moment, everything went dark. I held my breath, waiting. When the picture returned, the room was empty. The mirror was still there, but both men were gone. I glanced over at Mike. His face was pale, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. What happened to them? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper.
I don't know, he replied.
But after that night, my boss never came back to work.
No one ever saw him again.
His wife filed a missing persons report, but nothing. It was like he vanished. I felt a tightness in my chest. And you think that thing in the mirror took him? Mike nodded slowly. I think whatever's in that mirror, it's not from here. And it's looking for more. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the last hour pressing down on us like a suffocating blanket. I didn't know what to say, didn't know if there was anything to say. The implications of everything I'd just seen were too much to process. Mike suddenly stood up, startling me. There's something else, he said, his voice trembling. Something I haven't told you.
What?
I asked, my heart racing. Mike took a deep breath, then turned to face me, his eyes wide with fear.
I've been seeing it, he whispered. The mirror. It's following me.
I stared at him, trying to make sense of his words.
What do you mean?
He ran a hand through his hair, looking frantic. I've seen it in reflections that shouldn't be there. In windows, in puddles on the street. Even in my rearview mirror when I'm driving. It's always there, just watching. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. Mike, are you sure it's not just in your head? I mean, you've been watching these videos, digging into this stuff.
Maybe.
No. He cut me off, his voice rising in panic.
It's real.
I know it's real. And I think it knows I've seen it. I think it wants me. The fear in his eyes was enough to convince me. What do we do? I asked, feeling a rising dread in my chest. Mike glanced over at the monitors, the dark screens now reflecting our own pale faces back at us.
I don't know, he said quietly.
But we need to find a way to stop it, before it comes for us both. Mike's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. If this thing is following you, I began, choosing my words carefully, we need to figure out where it came from. Maybe there's something in those videos that could give us a clue. Mike nodded, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. There's more, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I kept one more drive, but I haven't watched it yet. I'm afraid of what might be on it. I glanced at the stack of hard drives on his desk. Show me, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Mike hesitated, then reached for the drive at the bottom of the pile. It was unlabeled, just a blank black shell. He plugged it in, and the screen lit up again. This time, the file was simply named Final.
He clicked play.
The screen went dark for a few moments, and then a single image appeared, a familiar street corner in the heart of downtown, recorded from a high-angle security camera. The timestamp in the corner of the screen was from just 2 nights ago. I could see the faint glow of neon signs reflecting off the wet pavement. It had recently rained. The footage was quiet at first, just the usual city sounds, distant traffic, the hum of streetlights. Then, from the edge of the frame, a figure emerged. It was a man, walking with an unsteady gait, glancing over his shoulder as if he was being followed. I felt my blood run cold.
It was me. What the hell?
I muttered, leaning closer to the screen. Mike's face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. The video continued. I watched as the version of me on the screen walked down the street, hands stuffed into my jacket pockets. I stopped at a corner, looked around, and then turned to face something just out of frame. My mouth moved, as if I was speaking to someone, but no sound came through. I took a step back, my expression changing to one of confusion, then fear.
What is this?
I asked, my voice trembling. Mike didn't answer. He just stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. Then, something moved in the reflection of a nearby shop window. A flicker of movement, like a shadow passing through the glass. The camera zoomed in, focusing on the reflection. And there it was, the mirror. I could see it clearly now, standing upright in the middle of the street, the same ornate frame, the same cracked surface. The me on the screen seemed to notice it too. I watched as I took a hesitant step toward it, my face a mask of terror. I could see my reflection in the mirror, distorted and blurred by the cracks. And then, without warning, my reflection moved. It took a step forward, toward the glass, while the real me stayed still. My reflection's face twisted into that same sinister grin I had seen in the warehouse footage. I felt a jolt of fear, like a cold hand gripping my heart. On the screen, my reflection raised its hand and pressed it against the glass from the inside, like it was trying to break through. The me in the video took a step back, shaking my head, mouthing words I couldn't hear. But my reflection didn't stop. It leaned closer, its eyes wide and hungry, its grin stretching wider. Then, suddenly, the glass shattered. The camera feed cut to static for a moment, and when it cleared, I was gone. Only the mirror remained, standing alone in the middle of the empty street. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Mike, what is this?" I demanded. "How is this possible?" Mike was shaking his head, his breathing shallow. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't know how it got you, but that's not the end." The video kept playing. The camera angle changed, showing another view of the same street corner. I saw myself again, or rather my reflection, but this time, I was walking away from the mirror, back into the street. Only, something was off. My movements were too stiff, too mechanical, just like the people who had stepped out of the glowing orbs. And then I saw it. A faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising off the asphalt. It moved behind me, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make the streetlights flicker. I watched as the shimmer grew more defined, taking on a vague humanoid shape. It loomed behind me like a shadow that shouldn't exist. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mike didn't answer. He just sat there, staring at the screen with wide, terrified eyes. The shape grew clearer, more distinct. It seemed to lean in, bending down as if to whisper something in my ear. And then it stopped. The figure on the screen, the other me, turned around slowly. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, and its face broke into that awful, twisted grin. The camera feed cut out again, the screen going black. For a moment, there was silence. And then, from the speakers, a low, raspy whisper filled the room. It was my voice. "Are you watching?" I felt my blood turn to ice. "Mike, turn it off," I said urgently. "Turn it off now." Mike reached for the keyboard, but before he could touch it, the screen flickered back to life. This time, it was showing a live feed, my street, right outside my apartment building. The camera zoomed in, focusing on my front door. I looked at Mike, panic rising in my chest. "How the hell is it showing this?" "I don't know," he replied, his voice shaking. "I swear, I don't know." On the screen, the door slowly began to open. I could see my own living room, the faint light from the kitchen illuminating the hallway. And then, I saw it. A figure stepped through the doorway, moving with deliberate slowness. It turned its head, looking directly at the camera, and I felt my heart seize in my chest. It was me. Or at least, it looked like me. But its eyes were wrong, too dark, too empty, like there was nothing behind them. The figure raised a hand and waved at the camera, its face splitting into that same horrifying grin. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, until it filled the room, drowning out everything else. And then, the screen went black again. Silence. I turned to Mike, but before I could say anything, there was a knock at the door. A slow, deliberate knock. 3 times. My blood ran cold. Who the hell could that be? I whispered. Mike's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," he breathed. "But whatever you do, don't open it." I stared at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The knock came again, louder this time. And I knew with a sickening certainty that whoever or whatever was on the other side, it was waiting for me. The knock came again, echoing through the dimly lit room. My heart felt like it might burst from my chest. I glanced at Mike, whose face was ashen, his eyes locked on the door as if expecting it to break open at any second. "We need to get out of here," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Now." Mike shook his head slowly. No, it doesn't matter where we go," he murmured. "It will follow." The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. The whispers from the screen had stopped, but it felt like they were still crawling inside my head. The door rattled, and the knocking came again, harder this time, more insistent. "What does it want?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Mike swallowed hard. I think it wants to take you," he whispered. "Replace you." I felt a cold sweat running down my back. Replace me? With what? Mike didn't answer. Instead, he got up from his chair, moved to the desk, and pulled open a drawer. From inside, he took out a small black revolver. His hands were trembling as he checked the cylinder. I don't know what it is, but I know it's not human, and I don't think it can be reasoned with. The knocking came again, louder now, more urgent. I backed away from the door, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but I felt rooted to the spot. "Mike, we can't just sit here and wait for it to come in," I said, panic rising in my voice. Mike nodded, his face pale but determined. "You're right," he said. "But we can't let it in, either. We need to confront it, outside." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you insane? You want to go out there?" He nodded again, more firmly this time. "If we stay, it will come in, and we'll have nowhere to go. Out there, at least we have a chance." Before I could argue, Mike moved toward the door, gun in hand. I felt a rush of terror and adrenaline as I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the desk, the only thing I could find to defend myself. Mike hesitated with his hand on the doorknob, took a deep breath, and then with a nod, he threw it open. The cold night air rushed in, and for a moment, there was nothing but darkness beyond the doorway. I felt my heart hammering in my chest as I peered out into the night, expecting to see something. Someone. But there was nothing. Just the stillness of the street, the faint glow of streetlights casting long, eerie shadows. "Do you see anything?" Mike asked, his voice tense. I shook my head, trying to slow my breathing. "No, nothing. But it knocked. I heard it." Mike stepped outside, his gun raised, eyes darting around. I followed him cautiously, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The street was silent, empty. Nothing moved, not even a whisper of wind. And then I saw it. A shadow, standing at the far end of the street, just beyond the reach of the streetlights. At first, it looked like a person, just standing there watching. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized it wasn't quite right. It was taller. Its limbs were elongated, its movements unnatural, like it was struggling to maintain the shape of a human. Mike saw it too. "There," he whispered, raising his gun. "That's it." The figure began to move slowly at first, and then faster, loping toward us with an inhuman gait. My heart leapt into my throat. "Mike, don't let it get close," I shouted. Mike took a deep breath, aimed, and fired. The gunshot echoed down the street, a deafening crack that seemed to make the world stand still. The figure stopped for a moment, its head jerking back as if struck. But then it straightened, that same horrifying grin spreading across its face. "Shoot again," I screamed, but Mike was already firing, emptying the revolver into the figure. It staggered, but it didn't fall. Instead, it kept coming, moving faster now, its grin growing wider, stretching impossibly across its face. "It's not working," Mike shouted, panic in his voice. "What the hell is it?" I didn't have time to answer. The figure was almost upon us, its footsteps heavy and uneven. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned on the flashlight and pointed it directly at the thing's face. The figure recoiled as if struck, stumbling back into the shadows. The light seemed to burn it, to push it away. I advanced, keeping the beam steady, my hands shaking violently. "Keep the light on it," Mike yelled. "Don't let it get close." The figure hissed, a low guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through my bones. It twisted and contorted, its form flickering like a bad signal on a TV screen. I kept the light trained on it, moving forward, pushing it back down the street. And then, suddenly, it was gone. I stood there, panting, my heart racing, the flashlight still shining into the empty street. Mike lowered the gun, his face drenched in sweat. Did we get it?" he asked, his voice trembling. I didn't answer. I didn't know. The street was empty, but I could feel something, a presence, a weight in the air, like the darkness itself was watching us, waiting. Mike turned to me. "We need to get help. Someone who knows what this thing is." "Someone who?" His voice cut off abruptly, and he stared at me, his eyes wide with horror. "What?" I asked, panic rising in my chest again. He pointed. "Behind you." I spun around, the flashlight beam swinging wildly, but there was nothing there. "No, it's in the reflection," Mike stuttered, backing away. I turned back to the glass window of the shop beside us, and that's when I saw it. My reflection wasn't moving with me. It stood still, staring back at me with those dark, empty eyes and that awful, twisted grin. My stomach dropped. I felt paralyzed with fear. The reflection raised its hand, placing it flat against the glass from the inside, its grin growing even wider. I felt a pull, a pressure in my chest, like it was trying to drag me into the mirror with it. "Mike!" I shouted, trying to step back, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Mike didn't hesitate. He grabbed me by the shoulders and pulled me away from the glass, breaking the connection. I stumbled backward, gasping for breath, the cold night air filling my lungs. "We need to go," Mike said urgently. "Now." We ran. We didn't look back. We didn't stop until we were far away, the lights of the city a distant glow behind us. Only then did we stop, panting, our hearts pounding in our chests. I looked at Mike, and he looked at me. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He shook his head, his face pale and terrified. "I don't know," he said. "But whatever that was, it's not done with us." I knew he was right. I could feel it, like a shadow lurking just behind the surface, waiting for its next chance. And as we stood there, under the cold light of the moon, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somehow, it was still watching. Waiting. For us to make one wrong move.